The Galactic Citizenship Council had processed, stamped, approved, or rejected exactly 4,712,903 species applications in its 400-year history. It had never, not once, not a single time in 4 centuries, had to invent a new category on the spot. Until today. Until her. Councillor Drav Osun leaned back in his carved obsidian chair and stared at the document floating above his desk. He was a tall man by Velhari standards, ash-gray skin pulled tight over a sharp jaw, thin metallic silver braids swept behind pointed ears that gave him an air of permanent, faintly bored authority. His crimson rank sash, 3 gold lines running diagonally across his chest, told everyone in the chamber exactly who he was, the man who decided who belonged in the galaxy, and who did not. He had held this position for 31 years. He was not, to put it gently, a man who enjoyed surprises. "Read it again," he said flatly. His assistant, Preta Voss, sand gold skin and a small silver collar light blinking softly at her throat, looked down at her data pad with the expression of someone who was very carefully choosing which words to say first. "The applicant," Preta read carefully, "arrived at Outer Gate 7 via an unregistered vessel class. The vessel was manually piloted. No autopilot signature. No registered trajectory code. The applicant presented no species tag, no homeworld coordinate, no biological scan pre-clearance." She paused. She also, according to Gate Officer Ren Dolak, smiled at him when he asked for her documents. Drav stared. Smiled. He found it unsettling, Preta confirmed. "I am already unsettling myself," Drav muttered, pressing 2 fingers to the bridge of his narrow-ridged nose. "What is her species classification on the preliminary scan?" Preta hesitated. That hesitation alone told him everything. "Unknown," she said. "The bioscanner processed her twice. The second time it actually asked to be recalibrated, as if it was embarrassed. The waiting room outside the council chamber was not designed for comfort. It was designed for psychological preparation. The walls were cold, pale blue-gray stone. The benches were hard, intentional. The lighting came from long strips set flush in the ceiling, casting no warmth, no color, just flat clinical white that made every species sitting under it look vaguely unwell. It worked on most applicants. Lyra Sonn sat in the middle of the bench, spine straight, one leg crossed over the other, reading something on a small, battered device she had pulled from the front pocket of her jacket. She was not unwell-looking. She was, if anything, completely at ease. Her skin was fair and clear, porcelain white with natural rosy cheeks that the clinical lighting could not drain. Her dark brown hair was pulled back from her face in a loose knot, 2 pens jammed through it because she had made that decision somewhere along the way and had no regrets. A few soft strands had come loose and framed her face without her doing anything about them. She wore a worn, dark charcoal jacket, practical boots, and a bag that had clearly survived several situations it was not designed for, and was proud of every scratch. Her blue-green eyes moved steadily across her device screen. She was reading. In the waiting room of a galactic government office that had just failed to identify what she was. Gate Officer Ren Dolak stood 6 feet away, against the opposite wall, watching her with the focused attention of a man who had learned, professionally and painfully, never to assume. He had run her scan 3 times. 3 times the machine had returned the same answer. Not dangerous, not synthetic, not altered, not enhanced. Just outside the index. The entire biological index of registered sentient species numbered 62,000 entries. It had been built over 4 centuries. It had matched everything. Everything except this. Lyra looked, up from her device, caught Ren staring, and gave him the same smile she had given him at the gate. Warm, easy, genuine, like she was perfectly happy to wait. Wren looked away first. The council chamber of Outer Gate 7 had the high vaulted ceilings, the curved gallery observer seats, and most importantly, the throne of recognition. The throne was not actually a throne. It was a biometric verification platform built into a raised circular dais at the center of the room, shaped like a high-backed seat because 300 years ago, some architect had decided function alone needed dignity. When an applicant sat in the throne, sensors in the seat, the armrests, the floor beneath, and the curved canopy above all activated simultaneously. They measured everything: pulse, neural output, atmospheric signature, biometric markers, cross-checked it all against the index, confirmed species, assigned citizenship grade. Done. 40 seconds. Every time. The chamber lights glowed blue during the scan, then settled green for confirmed, or amber for review. In 400 years, the lights had never done anything else. Councillor Drav Osun entered the chamber, took his seat at the head of the curved review table, and looked at the 4 councillors already seated beside him. To his left, Brix Solander, Talvin female, pearl white skin catching the chamber light, rose gold luminescent freckles scattered across both cheekbones, smooth bald head with its faint geometric shimmer pattern. She was already leaning slightly forward, which meant she was already curious, which meant she had already read the preliminary file. To his right, Vona Krit, Hesari female, pale blue skin, sharp gray eyes, slit nostrils pulled slightly tight. Already skeptical. Beyond her, Orin Jast, young, sand-gold, wide amber eyes doing that thing they did when he was trying very hard to look like he was not nervous. And at the far end, Zula Ferrin, deep violet skin, silver ridge lines from temple to jaw, arms folded, saying nothing, which from Zula Ferrin was essentially a complete sentence. Drav nodded to Preta.
Bring her in.
Bring her in, he said. Lyra Sonn walked into the council chamber the way certain people walk into rooms they have already decided belong to them. Not aggressive, not arrogant, just settled. She looked around once, taking in the vaulted ceiling, the gallery, the curved review table with 5 councillors behind it, and the throne of recognition sitting in the center of the room under its waiting lights. Her blue-green eyes moved with quiet interest.
Interesting room,
she said. Her accent shaped the vowels in a way the universal translators processed, with a slight delay, as if they were also thinking about it. Please state your name for the record, Preta said from her station. Lyra Sonn. Your species designation. Human.
The system wrote it down. The system also had absolutely no idea what to do with it.
Your homeworld coordinates. Lyra gave a sequence of numbers. Precise. Unhesitating. The system processed them. The system found nothing. Drav watched her face during this, looking for the small tightening around the eyes that every species showed when they were waiting for a result they were afraid of. Her blue-green eyes looked back at him. Calm, patient, a little curious. Ms. Sonn, Drav said carefully, you understand that entry to council-registered space requires species verification. I read the requirements, she said, all 7 pages, including the appendix. Brix Solander leaned forward, rose-gold freckles catching the light. You are suggesting we update a 4th-century index for 1 applicant. I am suggesting, Lyra said pleasantly, that I sit in your very expensive chair and we let the data do the arguing. 4 seconds of silence from 5 senior councillors. In political terms, 4 seconds is a storm. Drav looked at Brix. Brix looked at Vona. Vona's slit nostrils flared once. Oren very nearly raised his hand before catching himself. Zula said nothing, which meant yes. "Please approach the throne of recognition," Drav said. Lyra walked to it. She sat down like a person who had sat in chairs before and found the experience acceptable. The sensors activated. The chamber lights shifted to scan blue. 40 seconds, every time. At second 7, the scan data began returning. At second 14, the system flagged an anomaly. At second 20, it flagged 8 more. At second 26, a soft chime sounded, the kind that meant the system wanted a second opinion. At second 31, Preta made a sound that was technically not a gasp. At second 38, the scan completed, and the chamber lights turned gold. Not green, not amber, not any color on the outcome chart hanging behind the counselor's table. Gold. Warm, steady, certain gold, filling the entire chamber from ceiling to floor, catching the pale stone walls, catching the metallic silver of Drav's braids, catching the geometric shimmer of Brix's scalp, catching the silver ridgelines on Zula Farron's violet face. Lyra Sonn sat in the middle of it, perfectly still, the gold light sitting on her like it had always known exactly where to find her. Drav stood up. He did not know he had stood up.
"What?"
he said. "Is that?" Preta's voice was very careful. "The system has completed biometric recognition, Counselor."
It generated a new output category. It appears the throne found a match. It simply did not have a name for the match.
Brix pressed both palms flat on the table. "What is the category name?" Preta looked at her panel. She read it twice. Apex unclassified. Biological tier unknown. Neural variance off scale. Threat index 0. A pause. The system also added a note, automatically. Another pause. It says this species has been here before. The gold light did not flicker. Lyra reached up and fixed the pen in her hair, because the knot had come slightly loose. "So," she said pleasantly, "about that transit clearance." The note sat on Preta's data panel like a stone dropped into perfectly still water. "This species has been here before. 8 seconds of silence. 8 full seconds from 5 people whose entire careers were built on having answers." Zula Farron unfolded her arms slowly. 52 years in galactic governance. She had reviewed applications from species that communicated through seismic vibration, species that existed in partial gaseous states, species that filed citizenship paperwork as a collective consciousness with no individual identity at all. She had never seen the throne write its own footnote. "Pull the archive," she said quietly. Preta was already moving. The search ran for 40 seconds. It returned 6 results, 6 entries, spread across 3 centuries, each from a different year, each from a different gate officer, each flagged with the same initial classification, unregistered species. Preta read the names aloud.
Lyra Sonn, Elias Wynn, Nora Cade, Thomas Vial, Suri Park, Marcus John, Demi Rice.
6 humans. 6 people who had passed through Council-registered space over 300 years, been flagged as unknown, processed under emergency provisional clearance, and never followed up on. Bureaucracy, Drav thought, had an enormous amount to answer for. "What happened to them?" Brix asked. Her rose-gold freckles had gone dim. All the way dim. Preta scrolled. 2 were granted provisional transit. 1 was held for a secondary review that was never scheduled. 2 were released on a counselor's discretionary stamp. She paused. 1 left before processing was completed. The gate officer noted she politely thanked him and walked back to her ship. The room absorbed this. 300 years, Vona Kret said, slit nostrils pulling tight. "This species has been appearing in our space for 300 years, and not one follow-up was filed." To be completely accurate, Preta said carefully, 3 follow-up requests were filed. All 3 were marked low priority. All 3 were reassigned to a department that was restructured in 2847. The files went into a holding queue. She checked her panel. They are still in the holding queue. Drav pressed his fingers to his nose ridge again. So, he said, for 300 years, an unclassified species has been moving through our space, flagging our scanners, being granted provisional clearance by officers who assumed someone else would handle it, and sitting in a bureaucratic queue that no one checked. That is an accurate summary, Preta said, in the tone of someone who deeply wished they were somewhere else. The throne never identified them before because the throne generates a gold output only when scan data reaches a full completeness threshold. The 6 previous humans provided only partial biological data during scan, either because the gate equipment was older or because they did not sit completely still. Preta glanced at Lyra. Lyra had been listening with the focused expression of someone taking detailed notes inside her own head. Ms. Sonn, Zula Farron said, speaking directly for the first time since the lights changed. You sat completely still during the scan. I did, Lyra said. Most applicants shift. Nerves. I was not nervous. No. Zula studied her the way old cartographers study a map showing a continent they were certain did not exist. You were not. You knew what the throne would return. It was not a question. Lyra set her worn device down on her knee. I knew what I was, she said simply. I figured your chair would figure it out too, eventually. Today felt like a good day to let it. Oren Jast raised his hand. He actually raised his hand. Brix looked at him. Drav looked at him. Vona looked at him. Oren put his hand down. With respect, he said. The note. This species has been here before. The phrasing is not saying she has visited Gate 7 before. It is saying the species has been here, in this space, before us, before the Council. Nobody argued, because nobody could. The Council's registered space covered 42 star systems. The oldest confirmed Velhari settlements in those systems dated to 900 years ago. The oldest Talvan to 700. The Hisari had arrived from outside the cluster 400 years back. Before all of them, the surveys showed nothing. No civilizations, no structures, no signals. Except, Drav stood up and walked to the archive panel himself. He typed in a search he remembered from an academy lecture 30 years ago. A lecture he had mostly ignored because he had been focused on mandatory governance modules and had considered the elective material irrelevant. He thought about that now with some feeling. The search returned 17 entries. Pre-settlement anomaly reports, old surveys, filed before colonization, when teams checked atmospheres and soil and confirmed nothing was already living on a world before they claimed it. 17 reports. 11 different worlds, all describing the same thing. Ruins, small ruins, partial, worn by centuries, not matching any registered species' architectural style, not the grand carved structures of the Velhari, not the climate-shaped forms of early Hisari construction. Just simple, practical, efficient. And in 4 of those reports, buried in footnotes nobody had considered worth reading, a single recurring detail, markings on the stone, not decorative symbols, not language exactly, mathematical, precise, structural. One survey team had photographed a wall panel. The image was still in the archive, 400 years old, slightly degraded at the edges. Drav pulled it up on the main display. He looked at it. He looked at Lyra. His voice, when it came, was doing something it had never done in 31 years of professional authority. Miss Sonn, he said quietly, can you read this? He turned the display to face her. Lyra leaned forward slightly in the gold-lit throne. Just enough to see, clearly. She looked at the image for a long moment. Her blue-green eyes moved across the markings slowly, the way someone reads something they know well, but are choosing their words carefully before speaking. Then she said, very quietly, "Yes." The chamber did not erupt. It did not shout or bang tables or declare emergency protocols. It did something far more significant. It went completely, perfectly, breathlessly silent. "What does it say?" Zula Farron asked. And Zula Farron's voice, for the first time in 52 years of galactic governance, had something in it that sounded like genuine awe. Lyra looked at the image once more. "We were here," she said. "We are coming back. The door is still open." The door is still open. For 30 seconds after Lyra spoke those words, Drav Ossen stood in the gold-lit chamber and genuinely questioned every professional assumption he had ever made. He had built his career on the belief that the galaxy was a known quantity, indexed, filed, understood, complicated, yes, but knowable. What he was looking at was a young woman with 2 pens in her hair, sitting in a gold-lit throne, telling him that her species had been in this part of the galaxy before any of them, had left 900 years ago, and had apparently always intended to return, the way a neighbor leaves a note on a door before a long trip. "How long?" Brix asked. Her freckles were fully dark now. Pure stress. "Since the markings were made?" Lyra considered. "Rough estimate, about 900 years, give or take." "Where did your people go?" "Home," she said. "We had things to do." "What kind of things?" Vonacrit said slowly. "Does a species that carves precise mathematical notations on 11 worlds spend 900 years doing?" Lyra's expression shifted. "Not threatening. Not proud. Something more exact than either of those." "Growing," she said. Oren had been working quietly at his end of the table while the conversation moved forward. Young, yes. Visibly overwhelmed, yes. But the fastest data analyst at the table, which was exactly why Drav had brought him on staff. "I ran the throne's complete output data," Oren said. "Not just the category name, the full scan report." He looked at his panel, then at Lyra, then back at his panel. "Neural variance off-scale means her neural output pattern does not fit any registered range, not the outer ranges, not even the theoretical maximums we built into the index as safety margins." "Practically speaking," Drav said, "what does that mean?" "It means," Oren said carefully, "that whatever the registered species in this room are cognitively capable of, she is doing more of it, differently, and the system does not have a vocabulary for how much more." He paused. "The threat index is 0, confirmed, but the system did add one additional classification line I have not seen before." He looked up. "It classified her as a credential." "A credential," Drav repeated. "Those are the system's exact words, not mine." Drav turned back to Lyra. "You came through Outer Gate 7, he said. Alone, in an unregistered ship, carrying no documentation, knowing our scanners could not identify you." "Correct," she said. "Why this gate? Why today?" Lyra reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small flat object, the size of a simple card, and set it on the edge of the nearest surface. It was old. Not antique old. Not collector old. Old the way stone is old, and the way a mountain does not bother counting its own age. On its surface were the same markings from the survey photograph. "We were here. We are coming back. The door is still open." "Because we are ready now," Lyra said. "And we wanted to do this properly, through the front door, with the paperwork." She glanced at Preta. All 7 pages, including the appendix. Drav Ossen sat down. He picked up his stylus. He looked at the form in front of him, the one with the species classification drop-down he had filled out 47,000 times in 31 years without a single moment's hesitation. The drop-down did not have human in it this morning. It did now. The system had added it. Gold category, Apex unclassified, sitting at the very top of the index, above all 62,000 registered entries. Not alphabetically, not by registration date. The system had assigned it a priority tier that had not existed when the sun came up today. He filled in the form. He stamped it. He looked up at Lyra Sonn, sitting in the gold light of a chamber that had never produced that color before today, wearing a worn jacket and carrying a bag full of scratches and 2 pens in her hair and a card that was 900 years old. And he said the words he had said 47,000 times, the words he had never once said with this particular weight behind them. "Welcome," he said, "to the Galactic Council." Lyra smiled. The same smile she had given Ren Dolak at the gate. Warm, easy, completely genuine. "Thank you," she said. "We have been looking forward to this." Outside, in the docking ring of Outer Gate 7, in a berth assigned to an unregistered vessel class, a single human ship sat quiet and patient in its bay. Ordinary-looking, worn hull panels, a slightly different design language from everything around it, the kind of ship that did not announce itself. It had waited this long. A little longer was nothing. And somewhere, very far from any map this galaxy had thought to draw, on a pale blue planet circling a yellow star at the edge of everything known, a species looked up at the sky, the way they always had. Not with fear, not even with wonder anymore. With the steady, certain expression of people who had left a note on a door 900 years ago, and had finally come back to find it still open.